iPhone, it's good to see you here today. You're a consistent attendee, and I appreciate you being here. Okay, so here we go for the 11 o'clock class. We have already discussed suspects. We have already discussed converting that suspect to a prospect. Now we're going to say, what do I do when I go to the appointment? What is it? And listen, every one of you should have the agenda in front of you right now. I hope you do. If you don't, pull it up. It's on your advanced training spoon-fed courses. I think it's lesson 21.
The link is also in the chat.
Okay. All right. So you can get the link there. And folks, when I go for a first interview, I pull out, I have a copy of the agenda for me and for each one of the people at that meeting. And they appreciate it because it allows you to stay focused and allows them to see how you're building this relationship. It's so important to have an agenda. If you go in without one, shame on you. So you should just print it, put it on your letterhead, fix it so you can write their name on it, and use a bold ink, not a real thin ink, because if you use a bold ink when you're writing notes and stuff, they can see it better. So anyway, some of them are blind like me. So anyway, what we're going to be talking about is the estate planning, the agenda. And this is what gives you control of the meeting. So, let me just talk about what we're going to be covering today. If you will master this agenda using the sales script that's also in Advanced Training Spoon-Fed, it's also on randallbaxter.com on one of the videos. You're going to lead yourself to the front end sale, a $1,200 commission if you do it right, and a really, really good shot at the funding process on the back end. That's what I want you to learn today. So first thing I say to people, the very first sentence I use is, Mr. and Miss Smith, I'm a better advisor if I understand your family tree. And I'll say, is it okay if we draw yours right real quick? And I'll have a yellow pad there, and I don't even wait on permission. First thing I do is I draw a circle the size of a quarter, and I usually go to the husband of the group, and I go, welcome, Ed. I'll go, Ed, I need to know what your birthday is. And then you'll tell me. And then since they're married, I'll draw a line that's starting at their 3 o'clock on that circle. I'll draw another line over to the circle at 9 o'clock. And I'll say, Mary Lou, what's your birthday? And she'll tell me. Okay. Now, the very fact that they give me that information is what I call a micro commitment. And that means they are allowing you to move forward in the process. And they're allowing you to take control. So, Tony, what's the first thing on the agenda?
First thing on the agenda is complete the family tree.
Complete the family tree. And, I didn't put it down as number 2, did I?
Nope, it's number 1. It's primary.
It's number 1, draw the family tree. And when you do that, they will bond with you because they will be talking to you about their former marriages, their children born to the marriage, the children they brought to the marriage, where they live, and the whole picture. Okay, so you'll have it on one piece of paper. I usually take that piece of paper and staple it to the inside front cover of the folder, or I attach it right there on top. So draw the family tree. Ed, you got your agenda with you? It's okay if you don't. Win, what's the second thing you do?
Review the current estate plan status.
Okay, so you've drawn the family tree, and now you want to talk to them about their current plan, not the one you want them to buy. you know, if you don't do that, you're making a mistake, because not only have you learned about their family, in the second stage, you're going to learn what they have done to protect themselves and their family by looking at what they've already done. They're going to go, wow, this guy or girl is good. So I want to talk about their current plan. So, you know, this is another power phrase that I use. It helps to understand, it helps to explain the estate planning process in reverse. And this is where I get to get inside of their, and I haven't even asked them their health questions yet, but I get it to get inside of their brain a little bit, their mindset. And mom and dad know it and feel it. And I promise you that as soon as they start talking to each other, if you'll just shut up, you're well on the road to a sale. So it helps explain the estate planning process in reverse. So I want to start with the advanced care directive, not with the trust. Attorneys like to tell you how smart they are with all the trust and everything. Forget that. Because you're with mom and dad right now. And you've already gotten them to talk to you about their children and where they live and who their children are married to and how many grandchildren they have and how close they are to them. So you want to start with advanced care directive. And here's the question. Who in your family tree would you pick to represent you if you were unable to speak for yourself? And I like to use the analogy. I don't know if you don't have to do it the way I do it, but you know, back when there were old black and white TV screens, when somebody was dreaming, the screen would go blurry, and then they'd show up in the scene that they wanted them to be in. So you want to set the scenario, and you want to say, you know, tonight, because it's 10 o'clock in the morning when you're talking to them. Tonight at 6 o'clock, you're in the hospital, and you're in a coma and unable to speak for yourself, and your doctor doesn't think you're going to survive. That's in the power phrases. It's in the sales presentation. Could you imagine a total stranger having that conversation with you 10 minutes after you get in the front door? But remember now, you've already talked to them about their family, and you've already talked to them about their current estate plan, and now you've got them in a coma, in a hospital, and the doctor doesn't think they're going to survive. Who in your family tree would you pick to represent you if you were unable to speak for yourself? And you might even take that family tree drawing and shove it over there to them and say, which one of the people would you pick? And if they go slow, so of course you'd pick your spouse, wouldn't you? And they go, yeah. And then you look at the other spouse, would you pick your spouse? Yeah. But what if you and your spouse were laying on that table together, both of you in a coma? Who would you pick? And it could be, if it's a second marriage, dad might pick his oldest child that he brought to the marriage, and mom might pick her oldest child that she brought to the marriage. Might be different people. But you see how, if you do that, how much they're bonding with you in the conversation? And it's all about the early part of this is all about bonding. So that's when I switch over to, okay, let's say the doctor was wrong and you lived, but you were disabled for 3 to 6 months. And folks, I'll be honest with you, that happened to me in 2020. I was so sick with COVID that I was not thinking well. And I was glad to have Linda around to make decisions for me. And I knew that Linda couldn't do it. I was glad Lori could be there. So who in your family tree would you want to represent you with your finances? They will start putting their fingers in the circles of the drawing that you drew, if you make it over there close enough to them to reach it. And when they do that, that's another micro commitment. They've already told you who their power of attorney for healthcare is going to be. And they've already told you who the power of attorney for finance is going to be. And you haven't even tried to sell them anything. and you're just following the agenda. What's next on the agenda after power of attorney for finances? Anybody?
Talk about
Well,
the trust.
Don't you talk about the executor first?
Yes, that's
Okay,
part
you
of it.
want, okay, so you want to talk about the executor. Uh, then that's why you want to ask the question, would these people be the same for your will?
Mhm.
Okay, now they told you who their executors are. You already know what state they're in, what state they're from, what state their children are in, geographically. And then you ask the question, would you like to keep all this out of the probate courts? How are they going to say no? But first, you must understand the trustor, grantor, and or settler, because different states will call this person different things. In Tennessee, we call him the settlor. I don't know what they call him up there in Maryland, Ed. It might be either trustor or grantor. And if you go out west, it might be grantor. But they all mean the same thing. And you make a point of telling them they all mean the same thing because you're simplifying and clarifying for them. And you've got the stage right now. They all mean the same thing. What it means is you're the owner of the trust, and you're the only ones who can change the trust. I'll spell it right, haven't I? So then there's the trustees, and again, I'm just explaining things to them. The trustees are the managers. We have owners, trustors or settlors, and we have managers, trustees. In the beginning, in most cases, mom and dad will be both trustors and trustees. And make that clear to them because it hands them power. It hands them the power to choose, the power to regulate, power to distribute. That's what they want. Give it to them. But the next thing you have to explain, and this is what you're actually setting the stage for the back end sale when you say this sentence. There are 4 things that will keep you from being trustee in the future. And you know what? They're going to tune in. I promise you, they're going to tune in to listen to you. And that's when I try to write it down in writing that can be read when the ink dries. I try. But the first one's death. One of you might pass away. And if one of you pass away, nobody gets promoted. The surviving spouse is in charge. Is that what you want? And they'll both agree. If they don't agree, that they're telling you a lot about the design you need to have for the trust. Let them talk. Or if you don't die, 2 doctors, your personal doctor and one other doctor, have to agree that you can no longer be making decisions. You know anybody like that? Wouldn't it be good to know what the rules were? Or if you don't die, and if 2 doctors don't say that you're incompetent or unable to make decisions, a judge can rule that you can no longer be trustee. And it happens, whatever the circumstances are. But the 4th one is one that I do kind of regularly, maybe one every 90 days or so, which is a resignation. You have the authority to resign as trustee. So what you need to know in your trust document is that one of you may suffer one of these issues, but it could be that both of you suffer one of these issues, and then somebody steps up as trustee while you're both alive. And then I push that drawing over to them, and I go, who on this drawing would that be? And then I sit back and I wait on their answer. They may say none of them. I like to say either all of them, none of them, or some of them. Okay. I don't recommend, but you can set up a committee if you want to. Sometimes the committee works when moms had 2 wives and dads had, I'm sorry, moms had 2 husbands and dads had 2 or 3 wives. Maybe you want a committee. But if they're all born to the same marriage, they already know who they want in charge. It's either child one or child most qualified. It's certainly not the one that can't spend money right and can't handle money and has a little drug problem. And they'll tell you who it is. And then that's where you get to go in and say that's built in. The trustee decides how to distribute money to the ones with a drug problem or the ones with bankruptcy problems and things like that. They will identify those children on the family tree. If you're good, try to be good. So and then after the trust, after I explain the trust to him, I'll say, look, a trust has to be properly funded. So let's talk about that for just a minute. First thing we want to talk about is how we would handle your real estate, and we would do a quitclaim deed to put your house into the trust. Well, when they say, okay, I know that I'm going to charge them $350 for that, and I'm probably going to make about $170 just off the top. Then I'm going to go flip over to page 2 on the confidential. Those of you who don't use the confidential, I don't always use it because I've got it so memorized I can just draw it on a piece of paper. But you right now use the confidential until you learn it. But I just want to ask the question, do you have long-term care plans in place? Now, remember I've already talked to them. They're already been on the table with a coma. Do you have long-term care plans in place? They're either going to say yes or no. You don't have to dive too deep into it. You just want to know yes or no. That's it. If they say yes, say, well, is it through your life insurance or do you have a monthly plan? I did one Friday afternoon. The lawyer said, I have one, but my new wife does not. And we're both too old to start making new monthly payments, so we don't know what to do. I said, I have some ideas for you here in a minute. Not right now. I'm not finished with the confidential. I don't know enough information yet. And it's foolish of me to give control over to the client when I'm following the agenda. And they know right where we're going. So after I get the yes or no on the long-term care, I want to talk to them a little bit about an income plan.
Randy, a
Yes, sir.
curiosity.
Yes.
Did you just say that you were presenting to a lawyer?
Yep.
Interesting.
I'm not afraid of attorneys. They already had a trust, but it didn't fit the new marriage, didn't fit the new wife. There's money to be made there. And he's retired. And he looked at me and you know what he said? He said, I wish I had met you sooner. You know what you're doing. You know what you're talking about. So mom, I found out some things about mom. Mom has about $300 that she's got in her, $400 in her 401k. I found that out here in a minute on page 3. And she's about to inherit $250,000 on her share from her mother, who's probably about to die in California. But anyway, a properly designed estate plan will have an income plan. Now, first thing we want to talk about is there are two types of income. Income not tied to assets and income tied to assets. Folks, you got to separate those two. The back-end sale is the income tied to assets. The front-end sale is established by your knowledge of the income not tied to assets. It's called credibility. So take time to make sure they understand the two types of income. And then say, you all okay with that? And they'll go, yeah, and then you move on. Because we have to identify two future issues that we're all going to have. It's called a gap, and the other is called a cliff. Now, you're going to get a back-end sale on a gap on a pre-retiree who's maybe 30 days away from retiring or a year away from retiring. Government employees, they get even paid to go to these meetings. And a gap, by definition, is if you take the income that you have that's not tied to assets, is it enough to support your current lifestyle? And if they have a $4,000 income not tied to assets and a $5,000 lifestyle, they have a $1,000 gap. So how do you solve a gap? One is you can cut expenses, ha ha. The other one is you can get a job as a Walmart greeter or continue working part-time, whatever, okay? The third one is you can pull from assets, your income tied to assets, and you can pull $1,000 a month out. And the question is, will that money run out? The greatest fear a retiree has is that they'll run out of income, not money, income. So you identify the gaps. Then you identify the cliffs. And there's two kinds of cliffs. I'm gonna go back to that. There's two kinds of cliffs. One, the first cliff that you need to be aware of and you need to teach and you need to talk to the people about is when the first spouse dies. So that's why when you go in and do the income analysis, you want to find out what their Social Security is. That's an income not tied to assets. And when the first spouse dies, the lower amount disappears within 30 days. That's a cliff. Sometimes people have their pensions and then get divorced and their pension's already set and the spouse gets half of it and they get half of it. And when they die, it's gone. But they're living on it with their second wife. Sometimes the second wife will turn around and go, I didn't know that. Because, you know, I always tell people if you do have a conversation with me, you're probably going to learn something that you weren't aware of. So she said, you know, I sort of thought I knew that, but it never dwelled on my mind. How much is that? And it was $600. So not only if she outlives her husband, who's 6 years older than her, who has a couple of health problems I'll tell you about here in a minute, she's going to lose $3,000 a month the moment. Oh, yeah, he forgot something else. He has a $3,600 income from his company that dies when he dies. She's going to lose $6,600 a month in income when he dies. And they looked at each other and they started talking. What did I do when they started talking? Anybody know?
You listen.
You shut up and listen. Let them talk to each other. So there's two kinds of cliffs. One is when the first spouse dies, but there's one that's also even more horrific. And that's the spouse gets sick and does not die, and expenses go up and income stays level. That's a new gap, isn't it? But it's not. It's more serious than a gap. It's a cliff. So you know, Mom at that one interview I was at, Mom looked at Dad and said, "What are we going to do if I get sick first?" And his answer was, "You have your IRA." And she said, "You're not going to help me?" He said, "I didn't say that." And that's when I interrupted. I said, "We can solve that here in a little bit. Don't worry about that. There's a solution." And they want to know what it was. And I said, "Well, I need some more information." So then I went to the health questions. Folks, if you don't ask these health questions at the right time in this conversation, you're blowing the sail and you're wasting your time, because this will make what you've got to say so valuable and provable. So that's when I worked on the health questions, and I found out that Dad had a little bit of a heart issue. not only was mom very, very pretty and 6 or 7 years younger, but she had no income coming in of her own because they were just living the life of Riley out in the retirement community. The only health issue was his. So I looked at him and I said, well, Dad, you're a little closer to the cliff than she is, aren't you? And he looked at me and and this is an attorney, and he said, yeah, how'd you figure that out? And I said, just because of the questions I asked. And then I turned around to her and I said, if he's closer to the cliff and you're going to lose $6,000 a month income, what are you going to do? And he interrupted. And he said, she's going to be spending my IRA. I said, great. Let's take $6,000 a month and divide that into your IRA and see how many months that'll go. And then he said, but she can also sell this house. And she looked at him and she said, this is our house. I want to live here the rest of my life. I didn't say another word for a few minutes because they had a conversation about that. All because I looked at him and said, you know, you're a little closer to the cliff than she is, aren't you? I'd have a hard time saying that early in the conversation, but it's easier to say after you've asked the health questions. And I stopped and I said, look, I can help you with this. I have to have a little bit of information, just ballpark information. Let's briefly discuss assets that go into the trust. And he said, well, I know I'm an attorney. We don't put our IRAs in the trust. So what use is it? What good is it? And I said, well, that's fine. I understand that. Let's just talk about it. And that's when I go into page 3 and I say, look, all I want is ballparks. I don't need exact numbers right now. I just need to get an idea of where you are. Will that be okay? And they go, yeah. I always ask for permission. So after I go through their bank account, they tell me they had 3 bank accounts. They told me they had a money market account. They told me they were very attached to their broker. I didn't care. They told me about the annuities that they had, and the only annuities they had were SPIAs that were attached to that $600 I told you about. I asked them how much life insurance they had. They said they didn't have any. They had so much money, they didn't feel like they needed any life insurance. I said, well, it's okay. I said, tell me about your IRA. And he had, I don't know, $800,000 or $900,000 in his IRA, and he had a little bit in a 401k, about 400 in an IRA, and was about to inherit on a non-qualified level the assets from her mother, she had just gone to California to move from assisted living to skilled care. Can you see that solution starting to take place, starting to form? We know what the loss of income is. We know the type of assets that they have. So if I'm going to sell an estate plan in the front end, this is when I stop and I can say, you know, you guys have done really good with your assets. Can you see where having the proper paperwork is important? And they'll stop and say, yeah. And they give me $1,995, and I write it up and get the credit card forms on the paperwork. If I don't, I still sell paper forms. Sometimes I don't go to the computer as much as I should because I'm wanting to get in and get out. I usually have another appointment, and I'm going to take it back to the office and get it done. You can do it right then if you want to. But once they agree that the paperwork is there, and that if they don't have the right paperwork, they're going to do business with you right there. And that's where I use one more power phrase that I think you need to be aware of. And I'm going to say, you know, just talking to you here, now that we've got your paperwork ready to go and I have it ready in about a week, you know, you can meet me on Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Can you meet me next Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock? And most people are going to say, of course. I'm saying, well, okay. we're going to get you notarized. You can come to my office and we'll get you notarized with witnesses, or I'll come back to your house. I'm a notary and you can provide the witnesses. Which one would you like to do? And that's when they tell me. Sometimes they say, I want to come to your office and do it. That's okay. Sometimes they say, no, our neighbors are right next door. That's what I really want, because I want to meet those neighbors next door, because those are the two suspects I'm going to use to replace these people who are now clients on the spreadsheet. So when I've got all that done, I'll go, just talking to you. Now, this is important, very important. It's a power phrase. I've got some ideas for you on some of the conversations that we have, but I need to go back and do the research, and I need to run some numbers. When I come back to put your estate plan in force next week, would you like to see your numbers? People say yes. No, very seldom do they say no. So by making the sale, I've got them set up for the back end sale. Upon the delivery of the front end sale, they're coming into the office, or I'm taking it to their home. I've got their numbers and I'm going to show it to them. Sometimes I have to go back a third time. It's okay. I don't go back a fourth time very often. I usually corner them and they tell me whether they're going to do business with me or not. And that's okay. Because here's what I know. If they don't do the back end sale with me in the first interview, I know I've already set the stage for a future sale, because they're going to have a relationship change, an asset change, or a health change. I know that that's going to happen. They can't avoid it. It's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to you. Why would it not happen to them? So see, if you just follow the script and follow the agenda, it will lead you to the next step. Does anybody want to add anything or ask any questions about that? It's okay if you don't, but now's a good time to do it. Ed, do you have any questions about that?
I have one. I noticed this time before you went into explaining the trust, you actually reviewed their trust first.
Well, I reviewed their estate plan. Okay. Sometimes people have a trust, sometimes they don't.
Yeah, their current plan. You actually did that
Right.
first.
It's the
I
same.
noticed-
It's the same conversation.
I noticed on the sheet, we had already gone over the trust first, and then you went to their current stuff, whether they had a will or a trust. We did that after. So I just
Okay,
wanted to know.
I've done it so many times. If you use page 1 of the confidential,
Yeah.
you will ask them those questions about, do they have a will, do they have a power of attorney, before you review their trust. I have learned that and that's good to know, and they'll tell you if you're reviewing, what they have. So you're right. I did skip that part in this interview. If you follow the page 1 of the confidential and do the family tree, and then ask them the questions of what they have, and then explain the trust, you're better off. And I missed that part in this interview. Good point.
Okay.
Follow the confidential.
Okay.
Okay. I've done it so much, I don't follow the agenda always in my brain. I know I'm going to follow it because I've got the confidential in the back of my brain that shoots it up on the screen on my inside of my forehead. And so I just follow that process. And you will too eventually. But while you're learning, use the confidential page, the agenda, the confidential, the sales presentation, and the power phrases. When I talk about the agenda, I've been doing all 4 of those for you in this interview just now. But you're right, I skipped that part. What else we got?
When you're meeting with a couple that is not yet retired, they're, basically someone that's, maybe 7, 8 years, they're, 57, 58. I guess the thing they have a hard time conceptualizing, a gap or a cliff.
Maybe not. Here's why. If they're planning for retirement, say at age 58, they have to put less money in to cover that gap than if they wait to 65 to put the money in. Because you remember, the index annuity contract is growing at 6%. So if they need $1,000 a month and they're going to start when they're 65, if they back down to age 58, instead of needing $250,000, they probably need closer to 200,000 because the income side grows at 6%. Already have grown 36% in 6 years. So don't let
That's on the income rider.
Yes. So congratulate them. And see, they're old enough to pull at 59 and a half. They're old enough to pull money out of their 401k and put it into an annuity contract. So they can close that gap right now. If you review it a couple of times and inflation hits, you'll have a second future sale because whatever they put in might not be enough, and they might be ready to put in another 100 or 200,000 on the second visit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Well, somebody give me another one.
There's nothing yet in the chat, Randall.
We'll start calling
Nothing.
names. How about it there, Joe Cates? What do you think? You might have it on. Have you got them on silence, or they? Can they hear me?
Yes, they can hear you.
Robert, how about you? What? Okay, Robert, what did you learn today?
Probably learned on the back end that there's some more things I need to be adding to what I'm trying to do because I probably messed up on a couple already.
It's okay to go back because if you messed up, what they'll be hearing, they'll be hearing it for the first time. Go back. And see.
Okay.
All right. But because it's so important that if they're going to spend the time buying the trust, it's very important that they've taken the steps to properly fund it. And that's your go back. You can call them back and I said, let's just be sure that we've got everything properly funded. And they'll say yes, and go back in there and reintroduce what you missed.
Okay.
Usually my back end sales average between $6,000 and $18,000 each time, the commission on them. That's somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 worth of income riders. And sometimes they do more. The wealthier people, they'll do the 400 and the 500 because they got a bigger gap because Social Security won't cover it. And Robert, you have to. What would you learn?
I learned the transitions in the power phrases were important and not to jump ahead, like you said.
Don't
That
jump
was
ahead and always ask for permission when you're asking for confidential information like health
Right.
and numbers. Good job.
Yeah,
Ted.
that was, thank you.
Wynn, what did you learn?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Okay. What did you learn?
Well, so I was just putting together with what you were saying, trying to visualize when we're sitting in appointments. So when to shut my mouth.
Okay. Important.
And not help them decide.
Okay. Mike Laufer, are you with us?
I'm here. It's a good review. I mean, I've heard, this for a while, and it's good to go back through and get ducks in a row. And every time I hear it, you pick up something new or something you're not doing or something you could be doing or a different angle. So, I enjoy these to get going. So implement, that's the word for the year.
Right. Who is your advisor at Simplicity?
I've got Jay
Okay.
Bewer.
All you got to do is say, Jay, I've got these numbers.
Yep.
And here's the gap. Here's the cliff. Run me some illustrations. And they'll do all the work for you. When you say you have to do the research and run some numbers, let them do it for you.
Thanks.
And see, I don't get reports on his numbers. That 6 million that my licensee sold last month were just the ones that I've introduced Mike Bemis to. Mike and I try to work with each licensee to find out where they are. But every Simplicity advisor has the same skills as Mike Bemis if they're on Mike Bemis's level. And he is on a. When I first met him, I called him a whippersnapper. I told him he was one of my mentors the other day, and he said, "Did I get a promotion?" I said, "Yeah." He's not a whippersnapper anymore. Those advisors at Simplicity are sharp, and they know their products. Use them to make you some money. Anybody else out there want to say anything?
Randall,
Victor?
there's a question in the chat.
Go ahead. What is it?
iPhone said, I am just curious when the client says they want to be sure they have enough emergency funds. They are worth over 3 million. How do you respond? Thanks.
Well, even the insurance companies have suitability rules. And I would turn that question on them and say, what number makes you feel the most comfortable? More than likely, if they have $3 million, they're going to want to secure their income and leave the rest of it in the market to let it grow, or they're going to want to secure their income and they're going to move the rest of it into principal guaranteed MYGAs at 4.5% or 5%, and just leave a little bit in the market. So there you're talking about liquidity. If they put $500,000 in an index annuity contract, they have 10% liquidity on day one, year two. But they've still got 2.5 other million laying around, and you need to know what their income is. So when they ask that question, turn it on them and say, well, I think you can answer that the best. What amount of money would you like to have? I like to start with 3 times your monthly pay. Well, if they're retired, $1,000 joint and RMDs of $12,000 or $15,000 a year. Just look at them and say, what amount of money do you feel would be more comfortable on top of that? And they'll tell you it might be $1 million, might be 500,000, but whatever they tell you, they're telling you that the rest of it's ready to be moved. Did that answer your question at all, or do you need some more?
Randall, I think we should quickly ask there's who iPhone is. Is it Kendall or Felicia?
I don't know. Yeah. Hey, iPhone, you ready to be the mystery licensee?
I've just asked them to unmute.
Hey, iPhone. Do you have anything you want to add to what we've learned today? I'm just kidding you when I call you iPhone, but that's what shows up.
I think they're going to talk now. They're just unmuted.
Okay. Well, the real question is, are you implementing on the suspect level? And are you implementing on the conversion of the suspect to the prospect? And are you implementing by following the sales presentation on the go-to first interview? There's a reason I call it the go-to first interview, because it guides you into all directions, all products, all avenues in that person's economic life. And that's why I say don't be a dang old product salesman. You go into one product in mind and you present your one product and you lose it. And when all you really had to do was say, let's find out what we need to know to solve this problem that you have. And that'll tell you what product to use. And if it doesn't tell you what product to use, ask your consultant. Have a consultant at the IMO that you work with and tell them the situation. And if they're worth their salt at all, they will give you the answer. If they don't give you a good answer, let's get you moved over to working with Mike Bemis, because he's wonderful. He's smart and he's sharp. Okay. Anything else?
Nothing more in the chat.
Okay. So we're going to be talking about the back-end sale and the delivery at 12 o'clock. If you want to be there at the meeting, join us at 12 o'clock. I'm just going to leave the Zoom call on and I'll come back at 12 o'clock. I'm gonna just get a little fresh air outside in the courtyard, and I'll be back here at noon unless you have any questions right now.
That 12 o'clock Eastern time?
Yes,
Okay.
yes it is.
On
And-
the
and,
same link, Joseph.
on the
Same
same
link? Okay,
Yeah, same
all
link.
right.
Yeah. All right, so I'll see you all back here at noon if you want to be here. I hope you are. It's the 12 o'clock class is the most advanced class that we'll have all day. And we're going to talk about products a little bit and delivery. I'll see you in about 15 minutes if you
Chat
want to
then.
show up. All right, take care, everybody.